Hello everybody, it's Katrina from the Bead Mat and the Alluring Bead Boutique. I hope you're having a great day. So what we're going to talk about today is the basic setup for metal smithing at home. And I'm going to go over, in this video, we're just going to basically go over all the different tools and things that you'll need to get started with soldering jewelry projects at home. And we're going to start off by talking about these two torches. Let me move some of my other items out of the way, and we'll get right into it. All right, so I have two different little butane torches. And the micro torch, as you can see, has a little bit different, smaller nozzle here on the front. This is one you use for smaller jobs, obviously. And you can adjust it here to adjust the amount of your flame from low to high or anywhere in between. You can also adjust right here. If you see that little hole, this is your airflow. And you can make slight adjustments also using this particular knob to adjust the amount of air that mixes in with the amount of butane. You fill it up from the bottom. And it's recommended to use the ultra fine butane, which you can get this right over at Walmart or anywhere like that. But just, you want to make sure it says ultra on your can. And then to light it, you have to first prime it by pulling this little lever down. So there's a little lever right here. And you push it, when you pull it down, it locks into place. Then you can push your start button here. And as you can see, I've got some flame. And then you can lock the flame by pushing this little button right there. So let's go ahead and prime it, pull the little lever down, start it, and lock it. So now we have some flame going here. So let's turn it around. So I have it all the way on low. So if I move this, if I move the little dial up to high, you can see my flame shoots out farther. And I've got the full airflow going because the hole is open. If I adjust that down to where it has less oxygen flowing through it, you can see the difference that it makes in the flame. And then if I turn the butane down, you can see how it shortens that flame. So let's talk about the flame. So what part of this flame do you use for soldering? Well, the part that you want to use where you want to get your metal and your solder is right there at the tip of that blue cone. That is the hottest part, and that is the part which actually causes all the chemical reactions and things to your solder to melt and things like that. So let's go ahead and turn this one off, and you can turn it off just by pushing that button in one more time. Turns it right off. And it comes with this cute little stand, and you can, when you're not using it, put it in the stand. Personally, I never leave these torches running unless I'm actually using them. So I have seen some people who will just set them down with the flame still going. I really don't trust these stands that great. They are not that heavy duty. And their torch is easily tipped over. So just for safety's sake, you probably would want to start out by never leaving it running unless you actually have it in your hand and using it. Now this particular torch is the Max Flame torch, and it also has a stand. It also, you fill it from the bottom here. Now its mechanisms are slightly different, but for the most part they're a lot the same. There is your adjuster for your amount of butane. And then this little adjustment controls your airflow, this little spring. Now, to prime it, you just take your finger and see this little button here. This little lever, you push it down. Then you push the button in to start the torch. Let me turn it this way because I'm left-handed. So now I've got it started, and here's the lock on this side. So I have to slide the lock over to keep my flame on. So now I have this flame, and I'm on low with my fuel. So I'm going to push that over all the way to high, and you can see how much more flame I get there. Now this right here is the oxygen control. So if I put a lot of oxygen in, you can see what that does to my flame. And if I back off on that, You can see that I have a nice big cone of blue right there. And this one you use for a little bit larger jobs, like working on thicker sheet metals and things like that. And then, once again, to turn it off, you can just push this little lock over to the unlocked position and it turns it right off. So I haven't really used this one very much yet because I am just learning. But it's good to have, and I got it actually, I got it for free, and I'll tell you how. I buy some things off of Interweave, and I'm on Craftsy, and so a lot of times I get little emails asking me to do a survey. So I got a call from someone, or an email saying if I would do a survey, I would get a $50 gift card. And this was from Interweave. So the survey was over the phone, and a lady called me, and I agreed to it. And so with my $50 gift card, I bought this cool little bundle that included this Max Torch Flame and a couple of ebooks and some regular books. And I was super happy about it because I didn't have to pay for it. But those are the two torches. And here's the butane. Now, to fill up one of your torches, of course, you have to take the stand off, the back. You invert it upside down like this, which is probably going to be hard for me to show you because of my camera not being up too high. Then you just take the nozzle of your can and push it into the little hole. And you hold it until your butane starts to spew out. Like that. So you heard it start to spew. So that lets me know that it's full. So now this torch is full. Let me check my other torch. Since we're here, might as well. So invert my torch, stick the nozzle onto the pin, push it down, and hold it until the butane starts to bubble up. So now that torch is full. So now we've talked about our torches and something to solder with. Next thing we want to talk about is what we're going to solder on. And so I'm going to show you how I got started. So in my first endeavors of trying to get together a soldering station for my at-home metalsmithing, I had seen people using this rotating pan here. This is called an annealing pan. And it came with all of this little pumice stone that you just put right in there. And then I can't really turn it over to show you, but on the bottom it has a swivel. And so that you can turn it around like this so that you can get to all sides of your project with relative ease. You can see here that I've already got some rust going on this pan. And I'm not sure why, but it's okay. I don't worry about it. Now, with the soldering kit that I've very initially got at Christmas time, which my daughter got for me, that came with the micro torch, it also came with this magnesium block as a soldering surface. This was a separately purchased item. This was within the kit, and this is the magnesium block, and it is super, super chalky, and it's very soft. And you can see here that it mars up pretty easily. The good thing about this is that, like, you can carve it. So say you needed to make a space to put something down into it, you can actually carve out little areas in there if you needed to for specific type of tasks, which, you know, we're not going to go into all that right now, but suffice it to say that it is kind of handy to have something soft that you can carve into. Personally, I struggle with this quite a bit, and because I'm new to the process probably, but you can see where I get it really hot sometimes, and every now and then some of this magnesium actually will stick to the piece I'm working on, or the piece will stick to the surface, and it's a little bit harder to remove it so you can put it in your pickle solution, which we talked about in the previous video. So I thought, well, I'm going to try a charcoal block because I've seen a lot of people use those. So I ordered a charcoal block, and I'll put all of this is going to have links on where I got them, and you can purchase them just the same way that I did. Now this is a soft charcoal block, and you can see that I was trying an experiment and trying to learn how to do the ball head pins, but I was also trying to learn how to take a little piece of metal and melt it completely so that it rolls up into these little balls. heat that it took in order to make that metal roll up into that ball cracked my block. And I thought, well, okay, well, it's not that bad. I've got a little piece here I can use for some things, and a bigger piece right here if I need to use that for something else. It's a little bit messy, but it's a good. It is a very good surface to use. You can also carve into this one because it is the soft block if you needed to. It absorbs heat really well. And it just works really good for a lot of different projects. The charcoal is one that you want to have handy also. So I just took a minute to get the charcoal and the magnesium residue off of my hands. And so, you know, the trick to this I found is that there really is no trick to this. All the classes I've taken on Craftsy, all the books that I have and I read, they all have different recommendations. They all have, you know, depending on the instructor, they're going to teach you their preferred methods and their preferred tools. And that's great. But they might not all work out the best for you. So I went ahead and now I have ordered one more type of block. And this is a honeycomb ceramic block. And it's a little mini block, but it's really cool. And I have not tried it out yet, but we will be trying it out really soon. The really neat thing about this is that it actually comes with these little pins. And they fit down into those little honeycomb holes so that if you're working on something and you need to brace your metal, you can actually stick these little pins right into this. And they won't melt, you know, or mess up anything about your project. But you can use them to brace wire or other pieces of material that you may want to solder. And believe it or not, this is a really cute little thing. And I'm really itching to get trying on it. But it came with all those little pins. And the set I got actually had 2 of the discs in it. 2 of these little small discs. And I got it for less than $10 off of Rio Grande. So I will try to put a link for that too. If not, you can go search around on Rio Grande and find this little kit. And it's really adorable. And we'll be trying it out very, very soon. So now we've talked about our torch and our torches, and we've talked about some soldering surfaces. Now, one other thing, you can also solder right onto this pumice stone. You can lay things right in here, and you can solder using this stuff too. And there's several more other soldering surfaces, other soldering particles that you can buy and use. These just happen to be the ones that I have so far, and that I've tried out, and that I can give you a little bit of information about. So now we're going to move on to a few more of the tools and items that you'll want to have around. Now, in my opinion, these 2 items are not optional. If you plan on doing any metal smithing at home using the flame torches of any type, you are going to have a fire extinguisher, and you're also going to have some safety glasses. You should have these anyway if you work with snipping wires, cutting metals, or using a rotary tool to actually finish up your projects or anything that makes small grinds or whatever like that. You need to really protect your eyes. And so I got these off of Amazon, really nice and cheap, but they fit over my glasses. Because I wear glasses, you know, I can't just take them off and put on some safety glasses. I have to have the kind that are going to fit over my glasses. And I'll put a nice link up for these for you too. And they're really easy to put on and see through, and to protect your eyes is absolutely vital. To protect the rest of your environment, you have to have a fire extinguisher, and you need to know how to use it. So most of them come right here with the directions on how to use them right on the front. You know, you hold it upright, you pull the pin out, you stand back 8 feet and aim at the base of the fire, and you squeeze your little lever and sweep from side to side. It's very simple, very easy to do. You can take it outside and practice if you need to. I happen to have used one a couple of times in my life, so I know how to use it, and I keep it right here, handy when I work with my soldering equipment. So those are not optional, folks. If you plan on doing any of this type of work, you've got to get a fire extinguisher and some kind of protection for your eyes. And these are rated by OSHA, and they are very protective, and they will protect your eyes. Okay, so we're going to move on. Alright, so in front of me I have an assortment of other little tools that you're going to need if you're going to, do this type of work. In my previous video on how to mix up pickle solution and liver of sulfur, I already talked about how you can only use copper tongs for putting metals in and getting metals out of your pickling solution. Now, my pair of metal tongs came with the basic solder setup that I got at Christmas time. I'll try to see what I can find on Amazon and throw a link for those up to you guys. I'll also put a link to the kit that I purchased because it did, or that my daughter got for me. It did come straight off of Amazon as well. You're going to need a pair of tweezers. And these are the really, really super sharp pointed tweezers. These are very helpful for picking up small pieces of your solder and other things that you might be working on a hot surface. So you'll need some nice sharp tweezers. You're going to need a solder pick. And you want your pick to have a titanium head. And the solder pick has a lot of different uses, and we'll talk about that more as we get into working with our projects and things. But definitely a pick is used in sweat soldering, and or also they call it the pick method of soldering, where you can actually put a little flux on your solder pick. Using the heat, you can then pick up your piece of solder. Then you carry the solder to your project, and you would apply the heat to set the solder where you need it to go on your project. It's also used with these paste solders to position your the solder onto the project, and we'll talk more about this in a little while when we get over to the actual soldering types. If you're going to be using any type of hard solder or hard metal sheet solder, you're going to need a pair of clippers that you use to snip off your little individual snips of solder that you're going to use on your project. These came in my kit, and I'm kind of glad that they did because I didn't really want to gum up any of my nice flush cutters. And these work out really well. I've been using them for quite a little while here now. And you just can snip your little pieces of solder. The trick to it is to either hold them this way so that the groove is facing down as you cut, so your solder will fall out and land on your surface. Or if you do it the other way, you can make sure you hold your finger here as you snip to kind of keep hold on that solder, because particularly the hard wire solder, when you go to snip it, it will fly away. And if you don't practice and start out by doing it in a way so you don't lose your pieces every time, you're going to run into some expense. We'll talk more about that as we work on projects. Brushes. You're going to need a couple of brushes. This one here came with my kit, and it's used to apply the flux to your metal and to your solder. And flux is a chemical compound that helps the solder to actually flow onto the pieces that you're soldering together. We'll talk about those in a second. Well, let's just talk about them now. This handy flux, which is a type of a paste solder, this came with my kit. It's a little messy, but I'll go ahead and open it. You can see that it's a thick paste. This is the brush that came with it. And to use it, you have to get some onto the brush, and then you apply it to the metal and the solder. I didn't really like this brush at all because it was spreading solder all over, spreading the flux all over my pieces of metal, and it wasn't, I didn't really have a good way to pinpoint where I need the flux to be, which is, anywhere you want the solder to flow, you have to have flux there, but you don't want it all over your project, or you're going to wind up with solder flowing everywhere. Here's a good example inside of this ring band. Let me bring up some light here. I made this little copper ring band, but if you can see inside here at all of that excess silver solder inside there, that is because I had flux all over the place. And so the solder flowed everywhere that the flux was, so it pretty much coated the entire inside of that ring band. But anyhow, so that is the reason I decided I don't want to use this big brush, because everywhere you put that flux, you have the potential of your solder flowing to places that you don't want it to be. So I went over to Michael's, and I found this cute little pack of stuff for $1. It has nice little sable hair brushes in here, and some sponge applicators that can be used for a lot of different things. but this little tiny brush is the one that I've used here lately, and it works really great even with this paste solder because you can pinpoint more accurately where you're applying the flux, and that you don't wind up with it all over your entire metal piece so that you're potentially soldering solder all over everything. So I'll go ahead and put this one away, and I took a break and went and washed the flux off of my paintbrushes here, because you'll want to, when you're not using them, make sure that they're clean and let them dry. Alright, so then I just recently, as of yesterday, as a matter of fact, my order came. I've been watching and learning on Craftsy, like I've been telling you, and this is something that I see a lot of more professional jewelers using, is this type of flux right here. It is called Mighty Flux, and it is a self-pickling flux. You can use it on gold and silver, and I imagine you can use it on copper too, but I will dig into that more closely and make sure. Anyhow, you can apply this with a brush. I went ahead and I've got it saved a couple of these little sauce cups from a restaurant and washed them and dried them really, really well. And so I put a little bit in here. So you can just dip this into here and paint it on, just like you would with the paste solder. However, you can also take your tweezers, or this pair of tweezers or this cross-locking tweezers, whichever. You can pick up your metal and you can actually dip your item into this flux. You can actually dip the whole thing right in and flux the whole piece. So I haven't used it yet, but I intend on doing that probably later today or sometime in the next few days. I'm going to be doing a little demo on how to use some of these actual things on a project. So we're going to start simple and build. So now we have discussed all of these things right here. The last thing I want to talk about is these cross-locking tweezers and a third hand. Now, I am finding really quickly that being a metalsmither is very expensive, and the bulk of the money I have spent is on tools. Luckily for me, this thing came in the kit that I got, that my daughter got me. Cross-locking tweezers are look like this. And some come with wood grain handles here. These are just happen to be all metal. When you're just holding them, they're in the lock position. To use them, you squeeze here, and that opens them up. And then when you let go, they lock, holding on to whatever it is that you need to hold on to. So then they also come with this cute little weighted base, which is nice and heavy. And it has two different adjustment wing nuts here. So this one on the bottom allows you to move the whole part that holds your tweezers on. So you can, it pivots around on this little ball. That loosens it up. You can get it where you want it. Then you can tighten that bottom nut. Then this other one, I must have got mine a little crooked there. Alright, so this one at the top is actually what you use to lock your tweezers in. So you would open it up, then you would place the base of the tweezers inside the little groove between the two pieces of metal plate there. Then you just firmly tighten the nut. So now you have your tweezers locked onto this little stand. And they can hold different things while you solder. You can also position this to go sideways. I haven't really figured that part out yet, but I know that it works. So you can do it this way so that if you had, say, like a piece of sheet metal, which here's a little piece of sheet solder in here, I could actually open them and hold that so that my sheet is held out facing me like that. Instead of on its side, it would be like this. Which I just watched a great video on building this type of bezel setting, and she used her cross-locking tweezers to hold on to the actual back plate like that as she went to solder the bezel wire around. Well, mine aren't tight because I didn't tighten them back up, but as you can see, that will give you some lift to where you can apply the heat underneath like that. Okay, so that's enough about that for right now. So we went over some of these basic tools that are just simply used for the soldering purposes. Of course, you know there's many other tools that you'll need for cutting metal, you know, cutting wire, things like that, shaping it and forming it, stuff we've talked about in a few other videos, and stuff we're going to get into a lot more as we go on. But right now I want to go ahead and move forward, and let's talk about the solder. Alright, so now I want to talk about some different types of solder that you will be hearing about and trying out and using in your solder jewelry. First of all, you have wire solder, and this is silver solder. And silver solder basically is great for pretty much any project once you learn how to control the flow of the solder. So for example, it's even great for a project of this copper here, but because I wasn't very great yet at figuring out about that solder flowing, and this ring, as it turns out, is a great example piece to help me explain some of this stuff to you. And if I had done this right and I hadn't used so much flux and probably way too much solder, the only place you would see that silver would be just a tiny bit on the actual seam where you soldered your two ends together. But as you can see, we don't have that here. So pretty much once you get the hang of it, you can use silver solder for any purposes such as that as your metals. Or you can get some copper sheet metal or copper wire metal or solder. Copper wire solder, which you can find. I've already found some. They also have the copper sheet, which you just snip little pieces of. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then they also have some paste solder for phosphorus, bronze, and copper. And I had tried out one that I got, and I really didn't like it. It really showed a lot of silver. So I sent it back, and then I just ordered this one and got it yesterday. And according to what I read on the item description online, this one is supposed to have a much more yellowy look, so that when you solder on copper or bronze or gold filled, for example, or brass, you will have a solder that is actually more yellowy looking than the silver content that you see on silver solder. Like that. Have not tried it yet, but I will let you know how it works out. So, in this particular solder paste, it only comes in the one temper. And we're going to talk about temper. So let's talk about that right now. This one only comes in one temper, so I could only order, just the one tube to try out. What temper means is like your solders will come, silver solder comes in super soft or extra soft temper. It comes in soft temper. It comes in medium, and it comes in hard. And all that really refers to when you're talking about solder is whether it actually flows at a lower or higher temperature. So soft solders flow at lower temperatures. Now here's some silver solder paste, and I just took it out of the pack. And it comes with a little cute little hypodermic tip needle that goes on the end of it when you open it. But for reasons that I don't want to open it just yet, I'm not ready to start using it. Anyhow, so you can see what it looks like in there. And this actually has a certain amount of silver content. And that is basically how they determine the cost of it, is by the silver content. Anyhow, this is the soft. I did not get the extra soft. I ordered soft, medium, and hard. And so basically, I'm looking here, and I don't really see on here where it tells me which one is which. So I decided not to open these other two just yet until I get a chance to go back online and type in the item number to determine which one of these is actually... Oh, no, there it is. This one's the hard. Okay, I do see it now. It's right here. So this is the hard. But now, it does not say that here on the actual tube. So what I'm going to do, just to help my own self out, is I'm going to find my Sharpie and mark it. So I'm going to take this fine tip Sharpie, and I'm definitely going to write right here on it that this is the hard solder. If you're doing a project that requires you to solder more than once, or multiple times, the very first part that you solder on your project, you need to start with the hard solder. It melts it takes the highest amount of heat to melt it. So you would start with the hard. For the next solder, you would use medium. So I'm going to go ahead and mark these as I open them. And then also, if I were to decide I'm going to use these little hypodermic tips, I would mark them as well. So this one is the medium. So I'm going to write on this one, medium. And that way I don't get them mixed up. And then I got one more here, and this is the easy. So we'll take it out, and we will write directly upon it that this is the easy. So this one flows at a much lower temperature. This is the highest temperature. This is the lowest temperature. Hard is the highest temperature. Easy is the lowest temperature. And medium flows at a temperature in between these. So if you had to solder something, say you had to make 3 different soldered joins on a project, you would start with hard, then go to medium, and then go to easy. If your project only has one join on it, one place that you need to solder, you can use easy for everything. So those are the pastes, and we have those marked, so we're good to go there. Let me move some of my stuff out of the way. And we talked about that one. Let's move on to the wires. So now you have wire solder. Now this works a little bit differently. You actually have to snip this stuff off. But it also comes in the same tempers. So here is my hard, and I've left this little tag on here. But then I also bent my wire in a way to make it look like an H. In case my paper ever comes off, I'm going to know that this is my hard solder. It's not a very good H, but it's close enough. This is the medium wire solder. You can see that I bent this one end to resemble an M for medium. And then I have this one, which is easy, but it's also called soft solder. So I made a little S on the end. And then what you do to use this is I just take it with my bench block. And I take a hammer. And you could just use a chasing hammer for this. But what you'll want to do is you'll want to flatten out this wire. Your cutters, and you snip off little pieces of the solder that you want to use. And in general, you'll use pieces that are anywhere from 1 millimeter to 3 millimeters in length, depending on your project and where you'll be using the pieces of solder. So, for example, on this ring band, I only used a really small little piece of 1 millimeter size to solder the join between the 2 ends of the band, and that worked out just fine. On the inside, where you can't really see because I placed my solder on the inside of this bezel wire, and what I did was I cut those a little bit longer. So I cut some 3 millimeter pieces, and I lined them on the inside wall of this bezel wire, using my flux first, of course, and then lined up my little pieces of solder in there, and then I just simply applied the heat to make them flow and solder this bezel wire down here at the bottom to this back plate. So those are just some examples of where you might want to change the size of the little snippets that you cut. But you'll always just want to flatten it out and then cut some up as you use it. Now, if you're going to go ahead and cut a lot of it, I strongly suggest that you find some little baggies, mark your baggies, and clearly on which ones you have in which bag so that you don't get them mixed up. If you were to start with the easy solder first, and then you went in the opposite direction, on your next solder, like it would take a lot more heat to make this hard solder flow. So potentially you would just be totally remelting your easy solder when you were trying to add this 1 second. So that is why you go in the reverse order, if that makes any sense. We'll talk about more of it later. I just want to quickly show you one other form that solder comes in. And it comes in a sheet. And once again, very similar to your wire solder, you would just take some cutters or some snippers of some type, and you would just cut little pieces according to the size that you need to solder. And this particular sheet I just got yesterday, and it is for gold fill. This is gold fill solder or yellow silver solder. And I'm getting ready to make this beautiful little ring for my daughter, and we will be using this solder for that project. I may try to film that one on video, but I'm not sure yet. So like I was saying, because I've marked these, I also have 3 of these that came with each one, and I would basically want to go ahead and mark these as well, somehow with your little H, M, and either an E or an S, to make sure that you don't get them mixed up. Or you could, if you had long enough baggies, which you could potentially put, okay, so that's my hard solder, and that's my hard tip. And I could keep them separated like that. And then one more thing, when you're using these paste solders, in which I don't happen to have one yet, but I'm getting ready to go out and get it today. There is a set of picks that comes with 3 different color handles on them. I think it's red, blue, and yellow handled solder picks. And what you would do is you would designate 1 pick for your hard, 1 pick for your medium, and 1 pick for your easy on this particular type of solder right here. That way you're not cross-contaminating your solder with a different, using the same pick each time. Because with this paste solder, you could potentially cross-contaminate and have a mixture of, say, hard and easy solder together, which would give you something more along the lines of a medium. And you may need completely all the really, good hard solder joint. All right. So now we come down to the end of the story, and I just want to talk about one last thing that you will definitely need when you're soldering, and you need a quenching cup of some type. Now you can go buy these really nice little stainless steel quenching cups online for about $15 for a silly little stainless steel bowl, or you can use some Pyrex. And I just so happen to have this little tiny Visions, Corningware Visions pot. And all you do is put some plain old water in here, plain old cool water, and you keep it for quenching your items when they first are soldered. Say you're soldering this ring band. The very minute that you get finished and your solder flows and everything is looking good, you pick it up with your copper tongs off of your soldering surface, and you drop it, or you dip it into this cold water, or room temperature, doesn't really matter. You just dip it in there, and that's called quenching. You want to do that before you then take your item and put it into your pickle pot. So it is solder, quench, pickle, and that is the order that you'll want to go in. I am seeing some folks who take it right off the soldering surface and throw it right in the pickle and use their pickle to quench and pickle at the same time. I learned this way, and I'm going to stick with the solder, quench, then pickle method. All right, so now let's say, Datrina, I'm sorry, but you have so much junk. Where in the world do you keep it all, and how do you keep up with it? Well, I'm going to show you guys what I do. I have this wonderful, really old, messed up 9x13 cake pan. And if you'll notice, almost everything fits perfectly in here. These are my new little ceramic boards just hanging out there. Here's my little annealing pan. And once I move this paintbrush out from under it, you'll see that it spins right here in this little pan just fine. And I actually leave that in here when I solder. My torches stand up right here. My solder fits all down underneath those torches, the nozzles of those torches. All my little picks, tweezers, flux brushes, and solder cutters, and my little locking tweezer stand all fit right in here just perfectly. So when I get ready to start, of course I take these tools out. And I set my torches out on the side over here. And I remove the solder. And then I just have this open space little pan. So that this swings around really. Of course, that's not good. I'll have more room without that in there. But I leave it in there. once the torches are out or everything, it's got plenty of room to rotate my little pan. And that is what I use to hold everything into place when I'm working and when I'm not working. And I even stick my little safety glasses right in there like that. And then I just set this over in a little designated area over here beside my TV stand. And it sits there waiting for me until I'm ready to solder something. So folks, that's going to be it for now. I hope you like this little video and this little review of what you need to set up for your basic metal smithing at home. I'm going to get right into working on some of these projects with you guys really soon. I love how that came out. But I want to talk about these two for just a minute. So now these two projects are also considered a form of metal smithing. However, they do not require any soldering. So I went over how to saw out this cute little heart shape in the video on the bench pin and the jewelry saw. And then this little cap I just basically made with my shears and some files. And then a little bit of a hammering for texture and some metal forming tools. So that's something that you'll want to start gathering up to. You'll need some basic files to work on metal, whether you're going to solder it or whether you're just going to shape it. If you plan on cutting out any shapes, you'll need some type of cutting tools, and we'll get into more of that later. But I did want to show you there are plenty of things that you can do with metal that don't even require any soldering at all. And we're going to get into a lot of that. All right, folks, so that is it for now. I really hope that you liked this tutorial. Have a great day, and I'll see you really soon.